I'm Sabrina, 32, and I just watched my father thank my brother for a deal I spent 3 months pulling together. The boardroom fell silent as I stared at the mahogany table, my carefully prepared presentation forgotten in my trembling hands. Not a single person looked my way. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. Picture a 7-year-old girl doing homework in a makeshift office while her dad closed million-dollar deals in the next room. That was me. While other kids played outside, I memorized filing systems and watched my older brother Jake get praised for breathing correctly. Mom would drop me off every day after school. "Just sit quietly and finish your homework," she'd say, handing me crackers and juice boxes like I was attending some twisted daycare. Dad was always too busy for actual conversation, but he'd ruffle my hair occasionally and say, "You're learning the business, kiddo." What I was really learning was how to be invisible. Jake, 3 years older and infinitely more important, would swagger in on weekends like he owned the place. He'd spend 5 minutes looking important before disappearing to play video games. Yet somehow every family dinner became a celebration of Jake's natural leadership abilities and business instincts. "Sabrina just helps out," Dad would tell his golf buddies when they asked about me organizing his entire calendar system at age 12. Just helps out. Right. By high school, I was running quarterly reports that kept the company compliant. Jake was running his mouth about inheriting the empire someday. The irony wasn't lost on me, even then. But loyalty runs deep when you're raised to believe family comes first. College offered a brief escape, but even there, Dad's expectations followed me. "Business administration," he declared when I mentioned art history. "You'll need practical skills for the company." Because God forbid I might want something different. I returned with my degree and a dangerous combination of optimism and competence. Finally, I thought, they'll see what I can contribute. What I actually contributed was everything. What I got credited for was nothing. The Patterson account should have been my crowning moment. 3 months of 18-hour days, weekend research sessions, and carefully crafted presentations. I knew their industry better than they did. "Outstanding work." Mr. Patterson shook Dad's hand while I stood 3 feet away like a piece of furniture. Jake's strategic thinking really impressed our board. Jake's strategic thinking. I watched my brother accept congratulations for work that had given me stress-induced insomnia. He caught my eye and shrugged apologetically. But did he correct anyone? Of course not. "Besides," Jake continued, adjusting his tie, "Emma keeps telling me I need to step up my leadership game. My girlfriend works in consulting. She knows about professional development." His girlfriend, the consultant. Right. Because Jake definitely needed more people validating his inflated sense of competence. "Team effort," Dad beamed, his arm around Jake's shoulders. "That's how the Mitchell family operates. Team effort. Sure. If by team they meant me doing all the work while Jake took all the credit. I should have spoken up right then, demanded recognition, made a scene. Instead, I smiled and nodded like the well-trained family soldier I'd become. That night, I sat in my apartment reviewing emails from headhunters who'd been courting me for months. Senior positions at real companies where competence mattered more than chromosomes. Delete, delete, delete. Because family loyalty was more important than self-respect, right? The next morning brought a new crisis. The Henderson contract was imploding because someone had missed a crucial deadline. Guess who got blamed? "Sabrina, you were supposed to handle the compliance paperwork." Dad's voice carried through the office like a whip crack. 20 employees heard him dress me down for Jake's oversight. I stood there, jaw clenched, as he painted me as careless and unreliable. The same woman who'd never missed a deadline in 8 years. The same woman who'd saved them from 3 major legal issues in the past year alone. "It won't happen again," I managed. Though the words tasted like poison, Jake appeared beside me, placing a patronizing hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry, Sabrina. We all make mistakes. I'll help you stay more organized going forward. Help me stay organized." I'd been organizing his life since we were children. "But sure, Jake, please enlighten me about responsibility." Later, alone in my office, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through those deleted emails. Hartley and Associates was still interested. Senior associate position, 6-figure salary, actual recognition for actual work. My finger hovered over the call button for 10 minutes before I chickened out and put the phone away. Family first, I reminded myself. Family first. The Jameson deal broke something inside me that I didn't know could break. 6 weeks of negotiations with our biggest potential client. I'd researched their executives, analyzed their company culture, crafted a proposal so perfect it made their CFO tear up during the presentation. Actually tear up. This is exactly the vision we've been looking for. Mrs. Jameson told Dad afterward. Your team really understands our needs. Dad nodded sagely. Jake's been leading this project from day one. He has an intuitive grasp of client psychology. Jake's intuitive grasp. The same Jake who'd asked me what GDP stood for 3 months earlier. The same Jake who thought our proposal should include a section about leveraging synergistic solutions for optimal value-add optimization. I'd spent an hour explaining why that was corporate gibberish. I tried to interject. Actually, I'd like to add, Sabrina. Dad cut me off with a look that could freeze blood. Let's not overwhelm them with details. Details. My months of work were details. The only bright spot came from an unexpected source. Robert Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries, approached me after the ceremony. Miss Mitchell, that presentation was exceptional. Your market analysis showed real insight. He handed me his card. If you ever consider expanding your horizons, I'd appreciate the conversation. Dad intercepted before I could respond properly. Robert, thanks for the kind words about our team's work. Our team, right. Mrs. Jameson signed a 2-year contract worth more than my annual salary. Jake got a bonus and a company dinner in his honor. I got a pat on the head and a reminder to order more office supplies. Have you ever experienced something like this? Where your work gets credited to someone else and you're expected to smile about it? Drop a comment if you know this feeling. That night, I sat in my car in the office parking lot, staring at Robert Sterling's business card. His words echoed in my mind, expanding your horizons. For the first time in my life, I seriously considered it. Not just the job, but freedom, recognition, a chance to build something where my contributions mattered. I started the car and drove home, but something had shifted. The blind loyalty that had guided every major decision was developing cracks. The next morning, Dad announced Jake would be taking over the Hartwell account, another project I'd developed from scratch. Time for Jake to spread his wings, he declared during our staff meeting. Jake looked uncomfortable for exactly 30 seconds before accepting with enthusiasm. Thanks for trusting me with this opportunity, Dad. I won't let you down. Won't let him down. Because apparently, I'd been letting everyone down by doing excellent work without a penis. I smiled and nodded as always. But inside, something cold and clear was crystallizing. This wasn't about family loyalty anymore. This was about survival. The Thompson Industries presentation was my breaking point, though I didn't know it yet. 3 months of preparation for the biggest pitch of the year. Their executives flew in from Chicago specifically to hear our proposal. I'd prepared contingency plans for every possible objection, researched each board member's background, even learned their CEO's college fight song for small talk. The presentation went flawlessly. Every slide, every statistic, every carefully crafted argument landed perfectly. Their president actually applauded when I finished the market analysis section. Exceptional work, he told Dad during the break. Your daughter really knows her stuff. For one shining moment, I thought things might change. Dad smiled at me, actually smiled, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Then came the contract signing ceremony. We want to thank Jake Mitchell for this outstanding proposal, Thompson's CEO announced to the room full of industry reporters. His innovative approach is exactly what Thompson Industries needs. The blood drained from my face. Jake stood up, adjusting his tie with practiced confidence, accepting handshakes and congratulations for work that had consumed my entire spring. I sat frozen in my chair, watching my brother bask in praise that belonged to me. Not shared credit, not team recognition, complete erasure of my existence. Thank you, Jake said into the microphone. This project represents everything our company stands for. Innovation, dedication, and family values. Family values. The words hit me like a physical blow. These weren't family values. This was systematic theft. After the ceremony, as reporters took photos of Jake with the contract, Dad pulled me aside. You did good support work on this, Sabrina. Jake couldn't have done it without you. Support work. 10 years of education, 8 years of experience, months of preparation, and I was support staff. I wrote every word of that presentation, I said quietly. Dad's expression hardened. You helped. There's a difference. Jake had the strategic vision. Strategic vision. Jake had asked me what ROI meant last week. That night, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to Charlotte's apartment and sat on her couch, staring at Robert Sterling's card that I'd been carrying in my wallet for months. What are you waiting for? Charlotte asked, refilling my wine glass. Family loyalty, I said, the words sounding hollow even to me. Sabrina, loyalty goes both ways. What have they given you besides ulcers and insomnia? The question hung in the air like an accusation. What had they given me? The day I decided to leave started like any other Tuesday. Coffee, traffic, the familiar walk through our office lobby past the portrait of Dad and Jake that had been hung last month. 3 generations of Mitchell leadership, the plaque read. Apparently, I was invisible even in company photos. Robert Sterling's business card sat in my wallet, slightly worn from the times I'd pulled it out and stared at it. 6 months since our brief conversation, and his words still echoed, expanding your horizons. Maybe it was time to find out what that meant. The final straw came during our quarterly review meeting. Dad stood before the entire staff, presenting our year-end numbers with his usual commanding presence. Thanks to Jake's leadership on the Thompson account and his innovative thinking on the Patterson deal, we're looking at our strongest year yet. Jake's leadership, Jake's innovative thinking. I watched him nod modestly while accepting credit for deals that existed because of my work. The entire room applauded. Jake shifted uncomfortably, probably thinking about how he'd explain this conversation to Emma later. He'd mentioned several times how his girlfriend admired executive presence and professional confidence. Any questions? Dad asked, scanning the room. I raised my hand before I could stop myself. Dad's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, Sabrina? I was wondering if you could break down exactly which aspects of those deals came from Jake's direct input versus the broader team effort. The room went deadly quiet. This wasn't how Sabrina Mitchell behaved. I didn't ask pointed questions or demand specifics. I smiled and nodded. As I mentioned, Dad's voice carried a warning edge. Jake led both projects. The details are less important than the results. Actually, I think the details are very important, I continued, my voice steadier than my hands. Especially when discussing leadership and innovation. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He knew exactly where this was heading, and for the first time in years, he looked genuinely nervous. Dad's face flushed red. We'll discuss this privately after the meeting. But I was done with private discussions where my voice got swallowed by diplomatic silence. I'd prefer to discuss it now, I said, standing up. Since we're talking about transparency and leadership, what happened next surprised everyone, including me. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, and started reading. Thompson Industries, Initial Contact and Research. Sabrina Mitchell, Patterson Company, Proposal Development and Client Analysis. Sabrina Mitchell, Henderson Contract, Compliance and Legal Review. Sabrina Mitchell. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Jake, I looked directly at my brother. Would you like to tell everyone about your specific contributions to these accounts? He opened his mouth, then closed it, looking like a fish gasping for air. Dad stood up abruptly. That's enough. Everyone back to work. Now. As the room cleared, I remained standing, my heart pounding but my resolve crystallizing into something unbreakable. I'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. Dad's office felt smaller that afternoon, though nothing had physically changed. I sat across from his massive desk, while he paced behind it like a caged animal. What exactly was that performance supposed to accomplish? His voice was controlled, but I could see the anger simmering beneath his professional facade. It wasn't a performance, I replied calmly. It was the truth. The truth? He stopped pacing and fixed me with a look I'd seen him use on incompetent suppliers. The truth is that you're part of a team. Teams don't grandstand for individual recognition. Teams, right. The team where one person did all the work and another person got all the credit. Dad, I've been part of this team for 10 years. I've never missed a deadline, never lost a client, never failed to deliver. And in return, I've been treated like an intern whose main contribution is organizing your filing system. You're being dramatic. Am I? When was the last time my name appeared on a company announcement? When was the last time you introduced me to a client as anything other than someone who helps out? He sat down heavily in his chair, suddenly looking older than his 58 years. Sabrina, this is how business works. Jake is being groomed for leadership. That requires visibility and experience. Jake's got enough on his plate anyway, Dad continued. His girlfriend Emma is putting pressure on him about career advancement, making him feel like he needs to prove himself. Interesting. Even Jake's personal life revolved around other people's professional ambitions. What about my visibility? What about my experience? That's different. How? The question hung between us like a challenge. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to articulate what we both knew. It was different because I was a daughter, not a son. I want to discuss my role in the company, I continued. Either I get recognition for my work, or I'll find somewhere that will. Dad's expression hardened. Are you threatening to leave? I'm stating my value and asking for appropriate recognition. No one is keeping you here. Sabrina, if you think you can do better elsewhere, you're free to try. The words hit me like a slap. Not, please stay. Not, let's figure this out. Not even basic acknowledgement that losing me would hurt the company. Just casual dismissal, as if my 10 years meant nothing. Okay, I said quietly, standing up. Okay, what? Okay, I'll find somewhere that will recognize my value. For the first time in the conversation, Dad looked genuinely surprised. He'd been calling my bluff, expecting me to back down like I always did. Sabrina, don't make decisions you'll regret. The only thing I regret is waiting this long. I walked to the door, then turned back for one final look. Dad sat behind his desk, mouth slightly open, as if he couldn't quite process what had just happened. I'll submit my formal resignation tomorrow, I said. 2 weeks' notice, as appropriate. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I admitted, but at least it'll be my mistake, not yours. As I left his office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The terrifying, exhilarating lightness of finally standing up for myself. Tomorrow, I'd start planning my escape from the Mitchell family empire. Today, for the first time in my life, I'd told them exactly what I thought of their version of family loyalty. The resignation letter was surprisingly easy to write. 2 sentences, professional and clean. Please accept this as my formal 2 weeks' notice of resignation from Mitchell & Associates, effective immediately. I will ensure all current projects are properly documented for transition. Dad tried calling 3 times before I submitted it. I let each call go to voicemail. His messages evolved from confused, "Sabrina, let's talk about this," to irritated, "This is unprofessional behavior," to almost pleading, "We can work something out." Jake cornered me in the parking lot on my last day. "You're really doing this?" Apparently. I closed my laptop bag with more satisfaction than the action probably warranted. Dad thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. Of course he did. Because a woman demanding respect must be mentally unstable, right? Tell Dad I'm having a breakthrough, not a breakdown. The look of confusion on Jake's face was almost worth 10 years of invisibility. Almost. 2 weeks later, I did something I hadn't done since college. Absolutely nothing. For the first time in my adult life, I woke up without checking emails or reviewing project deadlines. The silence was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I booked a trip to Costa Rica. 2 months of beaches, hiking, and remembering what it felt like to exist without constantly proving my worth. My phone buzzed occasionally with messages from former colleagues asking where certain files were located or how specific processes worked. Apparently, the company was discovering exactly how much this support staff had been supporting. By week 3 of my vacation, Charlotte forwarded me some interesting gossip from her industry contacts. Mitchell & Associates had missed 2 major deadlines and lost a key client who'd specifically requested my involvement in their upcoming merger. "Karma works fast," I texted back, sipping a margarita while watching the sunset over Manuel Antonio. The beautiful thing about being in Central America was the time difference made it nearly impossible for family to reach me. Well, nearly impossible for most family. Mom still managed to call every few days, her voice tight with worry. "Honey, your father is beside himself. The Henderson account is threatening to leave, and Jake can't find the compliance files. They're in the system I designed," I replied calmly. "Jake has access to everything, but he doesn't understand your filing system. My filing system. The one I'd trained 3 different assistants to use over the years. The one with color-coded folders and detailed instruction manuals. If Jake couldn't figure it out, that said more about Jake than about my system. Mom, I'm not their IT support anymore. But your family. Family. The word that had controlled my entire life, used like a leash whenever I showed signs of independence. Family goes both ways, I said, echoing Charlotte's wisdom. When was the last time they treated me like family instead of free labor? Silence on the other end told me she didn't have an answer. Robert Sterling called me on a Tuesday morning while I was having breakfast at a beachside cafe in Tamarindo. I almost didn't answer. Vacation meant vacation. But Robert had been one of my favorite clients, someone who'd always acknowledged my work directly instead of filtering praise through Dad. "Sabrina, I hope I'm not interrupting your well-deserved break." "Just enjoying some Gallo Pinto and contemplating whether to learn surfing," I replied, watching waves crash against the shore. "I have a proposition that might interest you more than surfing." Robert had built Sterling Industries from a small import business into a regional powerhouse over 15 years. Smart, ethical, and refreshingly direct, everything the business world needed more of. "I'm transitioning toward retirement," he said without preamble, "and I want to offer you operational control of the company." I nearly choked on my coffee. "I'm sorry, what? You own 12% already from our profit-sharing agreements over the years. Those investments you made were smarter than most people realized." He was right. While my family mocked my hobby of studying market trends and making small investments, I'd been quietly building a diverse portfolio. The shares in Robert's company had been performing particularly well. "I'm not selling you the company, Sabrina. I'm making you CEO with an earn-out structure. You take full operational control immediately. For every year you hit our growth targets, you earn an additional 10% ownership." Hit targets for 5 consecutive years, and you'll own 62%, controlling interest. My vacation brain struggled to process this information. What about your 51%? I keep 25% and retire comfortably. The other 26% gets distributed to you based on performance. If you fail to hit targets, I maintain control and find a different successor. But honestly, I don't expect that to happen. So I'm not buying anything up front? Exactly. You're earning ownership through success. The company rewards the person who actually grows it, not the person with the biggest bank account. I stared out at the ocean, watching a pelican dive for fish with perfect precision. Sometimes opportunities came exactly when you were finally ready to see them clearly. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. But Sabrina, you'd be brilliant at this. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. After hanging up, I sat in that cafe for 2 hours, calculating possibilities. The structure was aggressive but fair. The company was solid, profitable, and growing. Most importantly, it was a chance to build something based on merit instead of bloodline. For the first time since leaving Mitchell & Associates, I felt excited about the future instead of just relieved about escaping the past. I accepted Robert's offer 3 weeks later, during a video call from my hotel room overlooking the Pacific. The paperwork was complex but fair. Robert had structured the deal to give me maximum control while rewarding actual performance. "Welcome to the big leagues, CEO Sterling," he joked during the signing ceremony. Though I suppose that would be CEO Mitchell now. "Actually," I said, surprising myself, "I'd like to keep the Sterling Industries name. It has integrity." Robert's smile was worth more than any bonus I'd never received at the family company. The transition was remarkably smooth, largely because I'd been involved in major strategic decisions for years. The staff respected my judgment, clients trusted my expertise, and the board appreciated my detailed knowledge of every operational aspect. Within 12 months, we'd secured 3 new major contracts and expanded into 2 additional markets I'd been researching. The secret wasn't magic, it was finally being able to implement ideas without getting them filtered through Jake's leadership or Dad's favoritism. 18 months later, I'd hit every performance target Robert and I had agreed on. Profit margins up 23%, client retention at 98%, employee satisfaction at an all-time high. According to our agreement, I now owned 32% of Sterling Industries, with operational control and a clear path to majority ownership. Business journals started calling for interviews. Industry conferences invited me as a keynote speaker. The rise of Sterling Industries under new leadership ran as a cover story in Regional Business Weekly. The article quoted several clients praising the innovative strategic thinking and operational excellence that had transformed the company's trajectory. I framed that magazine cover, not out of ego, but as proof that competence eventually gets recognized when it's not being systematically hidden. The most satisfying moment came during a Chamber of Commerce luncheon, where I was receiving an award for Emerging Business Leader of the Year. 3 rows back, I spotted Tom Bradley, one of Dad's golf buddies who'd witnessed countless dinners where my contributions were dismissed as just helping out. His expression when my name was announced was absolutely priceless. Pure confusion, like he was trying to reconcile the woman on stage with the invisible girl from family gatherings. During my acceptance speech, I kept it professional and gracious. No mention of family drama or personal vindication. Just genuine gratitude for the opportunity to lead and excitement about our company's future. But inside, I was thinking about every conversation where Dad had explained why I wasn't leadership material. Every time Jake had been credited for my work. Every family gathering where my career was treated like an expensive hobby. The standing ovation felt like 10 years of validation compressed into 30 seconds. After the ceremony, several business owners approached with collaboration proposals. 2 headhunters slipped me cards for executive positions at Fortune 500 companies. A venture capital firm wanted to discuss expansion opportunities. Success, it turns out, has excellent networking benefits. That evening, I called Charlotte to share the news. CEO of the Year finalist, 3 acquisition offers, and a waiting list of qualified candidates who want to work for me, I summarized. How does it feel? Like I'm finally awake after a very long nap. The silence from my family was deafening and, honestly, refreshing. No more guilt-laden phone calls about loyalty and obligation. No more manipulation disguised as concern. Just blessed quiet while I focused on building something meaningful. Well, mostly quiet. Beyond Mom's calls, there had been other attempts. Dad sent a formal letter in month 3, suggesting I consult for the company on a project basis. Jake left 2 voicemails that started apologetic and ended demanding. Even my Aunt Carol had called, supposedly just to chat, but somehow the conversation kept circling back to family healing and professional opportunities. I deleted the emails, ignored the calls, and sent Carol a fruit basket instead of explanations. Mom still called every few weeks, her voice carefully neutral as she asked about my new job. She never used the word CEO, as if acknowledging my title might legitimize my betrayal of family expectations. How are things going with your work? Exceptionally well. We just signed our largest contract to date. That's nice, honey. Nice. Like I'd reported getting a good parking space instead of landing a multi-million-dollar deal. These conversations followed a predictable pattern. Mom would share family news, Dad's blood pressure, Jake's girlfriend, my cousin's pregnancy, then carefully avoid asking about my professional achievements, then inevitably circle back to hoping I'd work things out with the family business. Your father misses having you around, became her standard closing line. He could have had me around by actually treating me like a valuable employee instead of unpaid help, was my standard response. The conversations always ended with uncomfortable silence, as if Mom couldn't quite process that her daughter might have legitimate grievances against the family dynamics. Meanwhile, industry gossip filtered back through various channels. Mitchell and Associates had lost 2 major clients and was struggling with basic operational tasks. Jake had apparently hired 3 different assistants, none of whom could replicate the systems I'd developed. They're looking pretty desperate, Charlotte reported after a networking event. Tom Bradley asked me if I knew how to contact you. Said something about consulting opportunities. Consulting opportunities. Translation: please come back and fix the mess we made after driving you away. Not happening. December arrived with its usual chaos of holiday parties and year-end deadlines. Sterling Industries was thriving, our best quarter yet, with bonuses for everyone and plans for aggressive expansion in the new year. I was reviewing staffing proposals when Mom called with an unusual request. Sabrina, I know things have been complicated, but I'd really like you to come to our New Year's Eve party. This was new. Usually family gatherings were assumed obligations, not extended invitations. I don't think that's a good idea. Mom, please. It's been almost 8 months since we've seen you. I know your father and Jake have been difficult, but you're still my daughter. The emotion in her voice caught me off guard. Mom had been the least toxic member of our family dynamic, more enabler than active participant in the dismissive treatment I'd endured. Will it be awkward? Probably, but I miss you. 3 simple words that carried more weight than years of corporate manipulation. Okay, I heard myself saying. I'll come. Really? But just for a few hours. And if it gets uncomfortable, I'm leaving. Of course, thank you, honey. This means everything to me. After hanging up, I wondered what I'd just agreed to. Walking back into that environment after months of professional respect and personal growth felt like voluntarily entering a time machine. But maybe it was time to show them exactly how much their support staff had accomplished without them. The Mitchell family home looked exactly the same, imposing colonial architecture designed to impress rather than welcome. Cars lined the circular driveway. BMWs, Mercedes, the usual suspects from Dad's social circle. I parked my new Tesla at the end of the row, taking a moment to check my reflection in the side mirror. 18 months of success had changed more than my bank account. I looked confident, polished, like someone who belonged in boardrooms instead of basement offices. The house buzzed with conversation and clinking champagne glasses. More than 30 people, just like Mom had mentioned. I recognized most faces. Dad's business associates, family friends, the extended relatives who showed up for free food and entertainment. Mom spotted me immediately, rushing over with genuine relief. You look wonderful, honey. Different. Happy, I replied. I look happy. She hugged me tightly, and for a moment I remembered why I'd agreed to come. Mom had always been caught between loyalty to her husband and love for her children. Not an easy position. Come say hello to everyone, she said, linking her arm through mine. The first hour went surprisingly smoothly. Polite conversations about the weather, business trends, holiday plans. Several people asked about my new position, though word choice suggested they had no idea about the actual scope of my role. I was chatting with my Aunt Carol about her recent trip to Ireland when Jake's voice cut across the room like a rusty knife. Well, look who decided to show up. The conversation around us gradually died as people sensed the tension. Jake stood near the fireplace, champagne glass in hand, wearing the smirk I'd learned to hate during childhood. Hello, Jake, I replied calmly, not moving toward him. What are you doing here? His voice carried just enough volume to ensure everyone heard. You made it pretty clear you don't want to be part of this family. Mom stepped closer to me, her grip tightening on my arm. Jake, don't... No, it's fine, he continued, warming to his audience. I think everyone should know the truth about my sister. You are a failure, Sabrina. You don't deserve to celebrate with us. The room fell completely silent. 30-plus people staring, some with curiosity, others with the uncomfortable fascination people have for public family drama. Jake took a step closer, emboldened by the attention. You left the family business 7 months ago thinking you were somebody special. Tell us, Sabrina, where exactly are you working now? Some entry-level position somewhere, trying to prove a point? I stood perfectly still, hands relaxed at my sides, watching him perform for his audience. The old Sabrina would have shrunk away, made excuses, tried to defuse the situation. New Sabrina? New Sabrina was curious to see how this played out. That's when I noticed her. A petite blonde woman standing near the kitchen entrance, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition to something approaching horror. She walked directly toward us, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Jake," she said firmly, "you need to stop talking." "Emma, it's fine," Jake waved her off. "Everyone here knows Sabrina's situation." Emma looked at me, then back at Jake, then at the room full of expectant faces. She leaned close to Jake and whispered something urgent. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see his confident expression begin to crack. Then Emma stepped back and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "Actually, she's my new boss." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. The color drained from Jake's face like someone had pulled a plug. His champagne glass trembled slightly in his hand as he processed Emma's words. "You're... what?" "Sabrina Mitchell is the CEO of Sterling Industries," Emma continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "She's one of the most respected leaders I've ever worked with." You could have heard a pin drop. 30 people stood frozen, trying to reconcile the family failure narrative with the reality standing before them. Jake's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "But you said you worked at some consulting firm." "Sterling Industries is a consulting firm, Jake. Among other things." Emma's tone carried a hint of the frustration she'd probably been feeling all evening. "We handle strategic planning for Fortune 500 companies. Sabrina just led us through our most successful quarter in company history." I watched the realization spread across the room in waves. Dad appeared at Jake's shoulder, his face ashen. Several of his business associates looked genuinely impressed, finally understanding why the name Sabrina Mitchell had been appearing in industry publications. "Small world," I said to Emma, extending my hand. "I don't think we've been properly introduced outside of work context." She shook my hand, her smile apologetic. "Emma Williams, Senior Project Manager, and I owe you an apology for this." She gestured toward Jake, who still hadn't managed to form a coherent sentence. "No apology necessary. Though I have to say, I'm curious about the dynamics here." Emma glanced around the room, then back at me with a look that suggested we'd have quite a conversation later. The party gradually resumed, but the energy had shifted completely. Instead of the dutiful daughter who'd fled the family business in shame, I was suddenly the successful CEO who'd outgrown her origins. Business cards appeared. Investment opportunities were mentioned. Several people who'd ignored me for years suddenly wanted to discuss potential collaborations. Later, after most guests had left, Dad found me on the back patio where I was getting some air. "I never imagined things would turn out this way," he said, settling into the chair beside me. "Which things?" "Your success, your position, the recognition you've achieved." I studied his profile in the dim patio lighting. "You mean you never imagined I was capable of success without your approval?" He winced slightly. "I always knew you were talented, Sabrina, but I thought you owed loyalty to the family business above everything else." "Loyalty goes both ways, Dad. I gave you 10 years of everything I had. Nights, weekends, holidays. I turned down dozens of opportunities because family came first." Jake needed space to develop his leadership skills. Jake needed to earn leadership skills. There's a difference. I stood up, ready to leave. "You never gave me space to grow because you never saw me as someone worth investing in." "That's not true, isn't it?" "When was the last time you introduced me as your daughter, the CEO, instead of your daughter who helps out?" Dad fell silent, finally understanding the difference between what he'd intended and what he'd actually done. "I was drowning in that office, Dad. Not from the work. I loved the work. I was drowning from being invisible while doing it." I moved toward the door, then turned back for one final thought. "I didn't leave to hurt you or prove a point. I left because staying was killing everything I could have become." As I drove home that night, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. The company I'd left was struggling with basic functions I'd managed effortlessly. The industry I'd been told would never respect me was now seeking my expertise. The family who'd dismissed my abilities was finally seeing what they'd discarded. But the most satisfying realization wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about discovering who I became when I stopped trying to earn approval from people who were determined not to give it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making others pay for hurting you. Sometimes it's simply succeeding so completely that their opinion becomes irrelevant. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Coffee Monday? I think we have a lot to discuss about workplace dynamics and family boundaries. I smiled, typing back, absolutely. And Emma, welcome to a company where competence actually gets recognized. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your power and never settling for less than you deserve. You matter more than you know.